So here's a video on absolute value functions. So the goal of this video is to show you how to identify domain and range of an absolute value function. So if we go from the top, the absolute value function looks like this. F of x is equal to the absolute value of x. For those who don't recall, f of x is basically a fancy way of saying y. So these two equations are essentially the same thing. So if we were to graph the absolute value function, you will remember that it looks like a V shape, but let's say you do not remember, then you can always create a table. I'm going to just put some negative numbers, -5, -3, -1, 0, some positives, 1, 3, 5. So if I were to get the absolute value of -5, so if I were to get this -5 and placed it inside this equation, so substitute it in, absolute value of -5 would be +5. And then I'm going to go down my x values. So absolute value of -3 would be +3. Absolute value of -1 is 1. Absolute value of 0 is 0. And absolute value of any positive number remains that number. So 1, 3, 5. So you might wonder, Miss So, why did you just create a table? And the reason why I did that is so that I could graph. So let's go here. So here I created my XY coordinate plane. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Just labeling my grid. Alrighty, so I am going to get each of these. So if I get a pair, an x value and a y, value, that becomes my coordinate point. So I would put a point at -5, +5, right there. I'm going to go down my table, so -3, +3, -1, +1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 3, 3, 5, 5. Oops, actually, it did 3, 2 for this one. Let me fix that. 3, 3. There we go. So now you might see the V shape I was talking about. So if I connect these points, then I connect these points. Boom. This is the absolute value graph. It's going to always look something like this. So from this absolute value graph, we want to identify domain and range. So let's first start with domain. So before we figure out, identify the domain of this function, we want to know what exactly is domain. So domain is all possible x values. So let me just write that down. All possible, all possible x values of this graph. So the x values, you'll notice for a coordinate plane, the x values are the numbers going left and right. So this is when x is 1, x is 2, x is 3, and I keep going further and further. So I go towards the right, and you'll notice x can be -1, -2, -3, and so on and so on and so on. So you'll notice this function here, this V graph, we only want to focus on the left and right direction right now, because that's when domain specifies for x values. So the question is, how far will this graph go towards the right side? Will it stop at 6? Will it stop at 10? So you'll notice we have an arrow here, which means this graph is going to go forever and ever and ever, continuing on and on and on and on. And right now my iPad cannot cannot contain this graph. You'll notice if we keep going, this x value will also keep going. So 6, 10, 100, 1,000. So it'll go forever to the right, and it goes forever to the left, and nothing's going to stop it. And because it's going forever and ever, domain is all real numbers. All real numbers. Let me just move this range a little bit lower. You'll also notice that depending on the textbook, so we have all real numbers, possibly Edgenuity might want you to mention that it goes from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity, because nothing's going to stop this graph. It's going to go all positive x values and all negative x values are accounted for domain. So there's domain. And then for range, range is all possible y values. So you'll notice from here, my y values are, you're going to look at the y-axis. You'll notice that my graph actually starts at 0 and then it keeps going up. This graph at no point ever goes down. So the only y values, all possible y values for the absolute value function start at 0 and then it goes higher and higher. So it goes 1, 5, 10, 20, 100, up, 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 and up. Because this graph is going up, 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 but it never goes down. So my range is basically everything greater than or equal to 0. So if we want to say greater than or equal to 0, so my y has to be greater than, so you'll notice I used a symbol here, greater than or equal to 0. The reason why I also have the equal to 0 is because my graph starts at 0. Starts at 0 and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up, up, up. If I wanted to write it in a different way, you can say it starts at 0 and it goes on forever and ever and ever. Boom. So there it is in interval notation. So here is a summary on finding domain and range for absolute value functions.